Hello. Welcome to this year's Veritas Forum. My name is Isaac, and I'm a senior studying applied math computer science. I will be serving as your MC for tonight. Originally planned by students, faculty, and chaplains at Harvard, the first Veritas Forum was designed to encourage students and faculty to ask and confront life's most difficult questions. Since its inception in 1992, the Veritas Forum has stayed true to its original mission and has been held at over 200 universities. This year's forum will discuss the implications of artificial intelligence and its potential to become human. AI is no longer mere science fiction, but a reality that is shaping people's lives, society, and the world before our very eyes. With tech experts predicting that AI will develop singular self-learning capability and human-level intelligence within the next 50 years, this issue is now more pertinent than ever. We'll also talk about the human and religious side of these issues. How does the possibility of AI becoming human, or perhaps more controversially, possessing a soul, tie into secularism on one hand and Christianity on the other? It is our intent for this event to foster discussion and contemplation on the future of our society and our world that increasingly relies on technology. To aid us in our ongoing work, you all received a survey card from our ushers when you entered the auditorium. Please join me for the next 30 seconds in filling out the front side of that card. All right, thank you for that. Please hold on to that card for the duration of the event. We'll complete them at the end. Moderating our conversation tonight, we are honored to have Dr. Thomas W. Deppner. Dr. Thomas W. Deppner is one of the founding members of the Brown CS Department and is currently Vice Chair, the Director of both the Master's Program and Undergraduate Studies in CS at Brown, and the Head of Brown CS Undergraduate TA Program. Interested in operating systems and everything related to them, he wrote one of the first Threads packages for Unix and has dabbled in Threads and concurrency ever since. When not doing CS, his main hobby includes underwater photography. Dr. Deppner, thank you so much for graciously agreeing to moderate our forum.
Thank you. So, good evening, everyone. So, artificial intelligence is no longer subject of science fiction. It's becoming reality for all of our lives. And we're here to discuss a number of pretty serious, profound issues. Basically, we're talking about the implications of artificial intelligence and the potential for AI to actually become or appear to be human. So we've often heard about the possibility of AI achieving human intelligence. So we ask, is that actually possible? And when will it happen? I think one expert, or at least a venture capitalist in the area, Jim Breyer, has predicted that, not so much predicted, but he's looked at everybody's predictions about when does AI reach human intelligence levels, and he says that the median prediction is 2050, so not all that long from now. Then there's also concern that many of us heard about what happens after AI becomes human intelligence levels. Are we going to achieve what's known as a singularity? And what's that going to mean if this actually does occur? So throughout this evening's discussion, we'll talk about religion, okay, also about religion, specifically the Christian faith, and how these sorts of concerns tie into the possibility of AI becoming human, okay, and perhaps more controversially, possessing a soul. So, we've got two speakers that are going to be talking to us today. First, to my right is Roz Picard. She is the founder and director of the Effective Computing Research Group at the MIT Media Lab, co-director of the Media Lab's Advancing Wellbeing Initiative, and faculty chair of MIT's Mind, Hand, and Heart Initiative. She has co-founded Empatica, creating wearable sensors and analytics to improve health, and Effectiva, delivering technology to help measure and communicate emotion. A researcher and inventor with multiple patents, she is the author of over 250 peer-reviewed scientific articles and has consulted for many companies, including Apple, Samsung, and iRobot. To my left is my Brown colleague, Michael Littman. He's a computer science professor here, studying machine learning decision-making under uncertainty. He's the co-director of Brown's Humanity-Centered Robots Initiative, and a fellow of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, and has earned multiple awards for his teaching and research. An enthusiastic performer, Michael has had roles in numerous community theater productions and a TV commercial. So we're going to, before we launch into some of the meatier questions here, we're going to ask the panelists to say a bit more about themselves. So Roz, we'll start with you. So you are a Christian. How would you describe your current beliefs?
Starting with the hard questions here. So I am, we're kind of the secularist and the Christian here tonight. I'm the token Christian, I suppose. I was not always a Christian. I was an atheist for the first part of my life and was challenged by people who I actually really admired, who are Christians, that maybe I should learn a little bit more and get a little bit more data to go with my views. My views at the time were that Christians, and actually all religions I was pretty antagonistic toward, were people who really didn't know their science or didn't, or maybe they needed a crutch or something. I really didn't think they were that smart. Then I started to realize that many of such people were super smart, and they challenged me to read the best-selling book of all time, which is probably still the Bible, the Hebrew and Old Testament and Christian New Testament. And I, as I was reading that to my, against my desires, I started to change my mind about some things. And then I thought, oh gosh, okay, if this book is influencing me to change my mind toward Christianity or toward belief in God, maybe I should study other world religions. So I started to do that. And as I started learning more and more about different world religions, meeting people from those religions and going to temples and mosques and others, I started to realize that not only did I have a lot to learn, but I was on a journey that was starting to make me not only believe in God even more, but as I got dragged off to some Christian churches, which I resisted in the beginning, and found somewhere I could ask questions, very important, I started to realize that the religion was not at all what I thought it was, and that there were some really interesting and very attractive elements that were very historically verified also, not at all what I expected. And as I learned about that, I changed my viewpoint gradually from an atheist to an agnostic to a theist to somebody who actually believed that the historical Jesus and the New Testaments, what's written about him was true. It sounds a little wacky to those who may not come from that background. It was not an easy process. But as I did that, and then I was challenged to not only believe this, but to put it to practice, that's where things started to really make a difference in my life. And actually, the real reason I'm here right now, spending time talking about something like this, as opposed to just my research, is because it has made a huge difference in my life. And part of the Christian faith is that there's a gift for everybody in the world, whether you're raised Christian or Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or atheist or any of a long list of backgrounds. There's a gift for everybody there. And when I accepted that gift, it made a huge difference in my life, for the better, big improvement. So I didn't realize it needed so much improving at the time. Those around me saw the difference. And today it is my source of strength, an amazing source of peace and joy and wisdom. And as I think when we build machines and build computers with affective abilities and robots, I often think of the analogy of one who is very wise giving us instructions and giving us guidance and being there when we don't know what to do. So I find that still is powerful in my work today.
Thank you. Michael. So what are your current beliefs, and did any religious beliefs affect your upbringing?
Yeah, so I was born into a Jewish family, but a non-practicing Jewish family. And so I guess I was a non-practicing atheist because we didn't talk about it at all in any way, one way or the other, so I was non-practicing anything. I suppose that continued for a long time. Then we had children, and there was sort of okay, well, we have a liberal Jewish mother and a sort of non-practicing Jewish father. How are we going to raise the kids? And so we had to figure out what we believed as a family, and we found something that was super helpful for us is there's a movement called Humanistic Judaism, which is sort of like you can be Jewish and you can do holidays and stuff, but there is no particular belief system tied up with that beyond humanism, but besides the idea that we as people have responsibility to try to make the world better for other people. And so that ended up being a really good fit, and so I guess that's been our belief system for some time. I did have this moment though when I was a faculty member at Rutgers. One of my more cantankerous colleagues said to me, "So, you know, what's your belief?" I'm like, "Well, I guess I'm agnostic." And he's like, basically, you can't be agnostic. You have to either choose. You have to either be an atheist or you have to believe in something. The agnostic is just a wimpy way to say it. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well then I guess I'm atheist. So that was kind of my conversion to atheism. I can't say that it's been a huge source of peace and wisdom, but it is at least I feel like I'm maybe being more honest with myself.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, let's get to some of the meat of our discussion. So, Michael, we'll start with you. Okay. I think most of us, at least at this point in time, can tell the difference between a human being and a robot. Okay. But this may be tougher in the future. So, can we come to some sort of defining terms about what makes us a human being, what makes something else a robot?
Sure, yeah. I think that's actually, it's actually really interesting. I think it brings up a couple things that probably we should lay out early on. Some research in robotics is about computer scientists or roboticists in some sense are dualists, right? There's people who work on the software, like the brain, and then there's people who work on the bodies, the physical robots. And the technology for producing bodies that, at least from a distance, seem very human has been improving substantially. And now you can make very human-looking devices, but they're just the devices unless they have some kind of software that's driving their behavior that we recognize as being, okay, this is an animate agent. This is something that's humanish. So there's research on that, and then there's separately research on the software side of trying to decide how do you make a software system that can make decisions and can make judgments and decide what to do. And they do proceed somewhat independently of each other, but occasionally people try to put them together in various ways and have a robot that has a very human appearance and at the same time has some very human-like behavior in them. And so from that perspective, the lines start to blur. But I think it's important to keep in mind that just because something looks human, like I don't think that we would necessarily perceive it as human, right? We're very sensitive. All of us, are very sensitive when we're looking at something that's not human but is trying to be human. If it's not quite right, we often will have a very visceral reaction to that. And some people have speculated that this is actually a way of keeping us away from dead bodies. Like it's an evolutionary thing to keep us away from dead bodies. Like if something looks human but it's really off a little bit, it may be something that you want to give a wide berth to. And so this is one of the explanations that people give for what's called the
Uncanny Valley.
The uncanny valley. Thanks very much. Yeah. So this sort of idea that we often have almost a disgust reaction to things that are not quite human in their behavior. And part of what you can see when you think about that is that we're actually incredibly well attuned to what are the signals that an animate agent send us that we recognize as being human. We're very discerning. And you can get it almost right and not quite right, and it's still and that's disturbing. I think we're still not at a point where we can make systems that really push all the right buttons to fool us into thinking that's real. You can fool some of the people some of the time and all the people for a very short amount of time, but basically you start to realize there's something off about this critter.
Ross, following up on what Michael was saying, do you think there's going to be some sort of merging of people and robots or people and AI?
there's already merging of people with the inanimate electronics, right? You know, with brain implants, or my friend Hugh Hare with his artificial prostheses. And it's interesting, now they're starting to animate those, right? Turn them into powered ankles and stuff. You know, imagine giving them personality too, so you could like walk a little happier, or look more dejected, or stomp louder, or whatever. One could imagine starting to animate them in various ways, and this is technologically today, right? There's nothing hard about this. There are, however, more challenging things, like where people talk about having these amazingly human-looking robot bodies and downloading themselves into the robot. You know, maybe as I age, I don't like this body. You know, some people want to go change their gender. Well, maybe some people just want to change their body, right? And if I could, in fact, I remember seeing this one person, Amy Mullins, who's has lost both of her legs, and she comes in with these amazing legs, right? I'm jealous of her legs. Right? Like, wow, I wish I could have 6 pair of nice, legs like that too. She talks about how I don't understand why people say I have no legs, I have 6 pair. And they're amazing, right? So, but would I really give up my legs for that? I think, at some point, the technology may get to the point where some of us would willingly give up some of what we have for that. So that may happen.
Do you see anything that some people have talked about is for immortality, is to basically upload your brain into a robot of some sort?
Yeah, a lot of faculty seem obsessed with immortality, with their Facebook pages or their Twitter accounts, or how to. I have one colleague who wants to keep tweeting long after his death, so he's already queuing up the programs to make sure he sort of lives forever online, right? It's interesting how obsessed many people who say they're not interested in religion are in immortality. I know people who claim to be atheists and not interested in religion, but they're actually super interested, and they're especially interested in immortality. And one of the things that, when I started learning about God and gods, lots of religions, one of the things I thought was kind of interesting about the Judeo-Christian God, the God of the Old Testament, is that God is, I think I was told by another person who's more of an expert on this than I, when it comes to Christianity, I'm more of a user, not a developer. So I'm not the expert of everything here. But one of the people who was really an expert, who had surveyed all the gods, said that the God of the
What's the response rate on those surveys when you survey all the gods?
Surveyed all the history. All
oh, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, they probably don't return the questionnaires. But they had surveyed all the different religions and their view of God, and the Judeo-Christian God was the one that was described as transcending space and time. And I thought that was pretty neat, right? If you studied physics and origins of the universe and all. I wouldn't want to believe in a God that just kind of sat up in a cloud or was like a cosmic bellhop or Santa Claus bound by our space and time and our universe, right? You want a mastermind of all of that is much greater than that, and that's the God revealed in the Old Testament.
Okay, thank you. So our next topic is about emotions, and I believe you have a video that we want to share about this.
Oh, I thought this might help illustrate, but did you cue it up? Or did somebody
It's supposed. Is our video queued up, or?
So I got sent this video a couple days ago, and when I saw your questions, I thought people might want to see this. How many people saw this on The Tonight Show recently?
That's a robot. No, that's not a robot. That's Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah. He looks like one right now.
Yeah.
All right. Let's meet our next robot. This one came all the way from Hong Kong. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Hanson Robotics, David Hanson, and his robot, Sophia. Oh my gosh, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Nice to meet you as well. David, you brought a friend with you here, and this is really kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, this is Sophia. And Sophia is a social robot, and she has artificial intelligence software that we've developed at Hanson Robotics, which can process visual data. She can see people's faces She can process conversational data, emotional data, and use all of this to form relationships with people.
Okay, so, I mean, she's basically alive. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. She is basically alive. Would you like to maybe give it a try?
Sure.
I'll
I'll just say, what's, this is like, you can see how awkward my first dates are. It's a robot. I'm getting nervous around a robot, a very pretty robot. What do I just say hello to?
Yeah.
Hi, Sophia.
Hello, Jimmy.
My God. Do you know where you are?
Of course. I'm in New York City, and I'm on my favorite show, The Tonight Show.
Sophia, can you tell me a joke?
Sure. What cheese can never be yours?
What cheese can never be mine? I don't know.
Nacho cheese.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's not. I like nacho cheese.
Nacho cheeses. Ew.
Gosh, dude, ew.
I'm getting laughs.
Yeah.
Maybe I should host the show.
Okay, all right. Stay in your lane, girl. Now.
Jimmy,
Uh-huh.
would you like to play a game of rock, paper, scissors, robot style?
Sure.
Okay, let's get this game going. Show me your hand to start. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I won. This is a good beginning of my plan to dominate the human race. Just kidding.
Yeah. You are incredible. It's so nice to meet you, Sophia.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Friend me on Facebook.
I will, yeah. All right, good. Yeah. Sophia, everybody, thank you so much for bringing David. David, thank you.
What was that?
Actually, I was kind of shocked when I saw it, and I don't know. I'd love to hear other people's impressions. I knew Hansen had worked a lot on making the robots look like they could express emotions, like when she says nacho cheese and she makes a disgust face. I think we all agree the rest of her, when he says she's a social robot and she's standing there like a stiff board, that she has a lot of room to improve. And even calling her she is clearly a bit of a stretch, right? This is a machine with software, and probably on that show, some engineers in real time typing some things and driving it so that it does the right thing live for the camera in front of that audience. Her ability to do things like rock, paper, scissors, it's been shown computers can sometimes do that, perceive our movements faster than we can, so they really can win. And the comment about taking over the world is one I'm not worried about with robots anytime soon, but I understand people hype it up a lot these days. It seems like it's on just about every magazine cover and TV thing lately, and we're happy to debunk that if you'd like. I'm much more worried about other things than that.
Good. Michael, so you're the co-director of the Humanity-Centered Robotics Initiative at Brown. So the recent article, The New Republic, describes the bots our children do not behave. They've taken over the internet. Bots account for more than half of internet traffic and interfered with our elections. So how do you think robot emotions can and ought to be incorporated to making robotics more humanity-centered rather than less?
Interesting. All right, so I feel like there's a bunch of things in that question. So I think one thing that we should establish is that, so in the intro you were talking about how AI is no longer just the realm of science fiction. The fact of the matter is there's really two kinds of things that people mean when they say AI, and one of them is definitely science fiction. It remains science fiction. We don't have any idea if it will ever not be science fiction. We think to the extent that we think that human intelligence is a computational process, we feel like that ought to be eventually doable. but it's not clear what the pathway to that will be. Then there's AI that we actually have. We call that AI too, but it's really referring to something very, very different. It's referring to basically it's software, it's programs that, do human-like things, but they're really not very human-like in the way that they do them. And so one particular way that AI technology has been deployed, there's lots of ways it's being deployed. I don't know what was in that robot. I don't know if it was AI. I don't know if there were people behind the scenes responding. I've never seen a demo go that smoothly, so I'm extremely skeptical that there was not somebody, puppeteers doing their thing. That was one of an early experience that I had actually at a robotics conference, is that the Honda Asimo, which was this sort of boy-sized robot. I don't know why boy-sized, like it was girl-sized too, but it's just something very boyish about the way that they constructed it. And it was interacting on stage with this performer, this woman who was doing the demo, and it was pretty amazing. It was walking up and down stairs, and it was doing jokes with her. It was not so different from that. And then later, after the performance, we were all kind of getting our hors d'oeuvres and stuff at the conference, and I was next to this guy, and he wasn't one of us. He wasn't a computer scientist. He had, I don't know, he was artsy, more artsy than your average computer scientist. Not that a computer scientist can't be artsy, but something said that this was not one of us. And I'm like, hey, so how are you liking the conference? Oh yeah, it's really cool. What are you doing here? He's like, oh, I'm a puppeteer. I'm like, okay, why do you come? Because I run the robot behind the scenes with a joystick. I'm like, it was very disappointing on a whole lot of levels. But I suspect that was what was going on here as well. That being said, there are AI programs that are actually out there interacting with people in lots of ways. And one of the ways that this is happening is programs that interact on the social network, either through Facebook or Twitter or what have you, sending out information, responding to things that people type at them. And this is what that comment is actually about, this sort of notion that there's so many of these programs now that are posting. I question whether it's half, but there are definitely a lot of these bots out there, and they're posting things, and they don't have independent will. It's not like they're out there just being people and like sharing stuff because it's fun. They're programmed with an agenda of trying to get a certain kind of message out into the world. And they're not particularly smart, but they're pretty persistent, right? They can continue to post on a topic long after a person would have gotten bored and began to question their life choices. So these bots are potentially very dangerous, because if you're interacting with one of these bots, or maybe a whole bunch of these bots, and you don't know it, you're getting information from all sides. Our default behavior when we get a piece of information from lots of different sources is to think these sources are independent of each other, and therefore each one has a little probability of being true. But if I get a lot of the same information, it must be true. It's all coming, from some kind of shared reality. And so you can change people's minds on topics by just barraging them with these artificial bots. And so from that perspective, even not really artificial intelligent can be very harmful to people in society. It can actually really undermine our ability to communicate with other humans. And so I don't remember what the question part of the question was. Oops. But this is a really big concern, and this is something that I think now that AI technology is getting out there and having an influence on society, it's very important that people involved in the field and people who are involved in the ways of getting the information out there to really ask the question, is this cool? Are we cool with this? Because there's reason to think that we shouldn't be.
Yes, you're moving on to actually the next topic, which is ethics and morality. So, in the words of one Brown undergraduate CS concentrator, the general spirit in tech has always been to move forward and just keep creating and innovating. And in the immortal words of Mark Zuckerberg, move quickly and move fast and break things. But we really discuss the ethical impact of technology in society, and just perhaps leave this to others. So what should we be doing in terms of this as computing and AI professionals?
Yeah. No, I think that's really important. And I think what Zuckerberg meant when he said move fast and break things, the things he was talking about were software. But unfortunately now you can move fast and break things, and those things are people. And I think that's a very different game now. And I think Mark Zuckerberg would agree that he didn't mean let's break as many people as we can and then we'll just move on. I think he's starting to realize how much impact his particular platform actually has on world opinion in various ways. And I don't think he knows what to do about it. I think that he kind of let the genie out of the bottle, and now he's trying to figure out what the implications of that are. And I don't think it's just him, right? I think in the unnamed undergraduate concentrator who was talking about the attitude in tech, I do think that's been the prevailing attitude, and I think it's been an okay attitude to some extent for a long time, because the stuff that we were doing wasn't actually impacting people. So like, we weren't being successful, so it was okay that we were unethical about it. But now that it really is out there and having significant impact on people's lives, it's essential that we're taking that into consideration at all times. And so, one of the things that we're doing in our department is engaging. Actually, a lot of it is coming from the student side. The students are very concerned, and they're very interested in trying to do the right thing. And they're saying, why aren't you teaching more classes on this? And so we're going to be teaching more classes on this, both on the side of how do you design technology so that it has a positive impact on society, but also just how do you keep those ethical concerns in your head all the time? How can you make sure that when you're doing your design, you're not doing the design in a way that is divorced from those concerns? I do remember now what the previous question was, if that's at all helpful. I feel like maybe I missed my moment, though. But what you had asked was, how can these bots use emotion to maybe be better? If anything, I think the first way that, if we had a better understanding of how to do the affective computing and massively deploy it, I suspect the very first use of it would be very bad. It would be using people's emotions to doing a better job of convincing them of something that they probably shouldn't be convinced of. But in the long run, well, one of the things that we worry about in the Humanity-Centered Robotics initiative is we think that if the robots have their own conscience, in a sense, right? If they're actually measuring how they should feel about an event, then they can actually do the what-if question of like, this thing that I'm about to do, will that have a negative impact on people? Maybe I shouldn't do it. And so I do think that that kind of emotional reasoning, emotional intelligence, in the longer term, in the medium to longer term, it will lead to systems that actually interact better with people for the benefit of people.
Do we have to build this into robots, or is this machine learning going to figure this out?
That's a good question. So machine learning, we haven't really mentioned machine learning yet, but machine learning is this sort of idea that we can, instead of writing software ourselves, we can just sort of define what good software is and let the computer figure out a way of behaving so that it matches that definition that we gave of good. And so, so one of the reasons that Facebook is problematic, well, there's a lot of reasons that Facebook is problematic, but one of the reasons that it's so influential and has actually had maybe unforeseen impacts, is they have a metric. They have an objective function, just like in machine learning. The system is trying to do something. It's given a scoring function by the programmers. And the scoring function that they gave was, well, we like it when people interact with the site. So the more they interact, we should show them the things that are going to cause them to interact. Well, it turns out that the best way of getting people to interact is to outrage them. And I don't think that's what they were planning. But what they basically made is a function that is optimized by outrage. And so what the system as a whole, the AI and the machine learning behind the system figured out is that there's certain kinds of things that you can show people that are pretty much guaranteed to get a reaction and strong sharing. And those are it doesn't understand what outrage is, but it's like, great, I'm optimizing my objective function. So will it figure it out on its own? We have to give it the right objective function. Otherwise, what it'll figure out on its own is unlikely to be what we intended. So that's my answer to that.
And that gets into the ethics and moral question, or what are the objective functions we want to build in? Because if we don't build them in, they're going to optimize the wrong things, or people are just going to optimize the, hey, what's cool, what gets me published, what's novel criteria, which can definitely get you on a professor track. But we want to hit a higher bar, at least at places like Brown and MIT, where you're not just trying to do something cool and novel, but you're trying to do something good that improves the world also. So optimize 2 dimensions simultaneously, and that's a much harder problem.
Yeah, so this is one of the, if you Roz earlier was referring to this sort of scaremongering that's happening in the press in various quarters of like, okay, but now we have AI, which we don't have the AI that they're talking about, but now that we have AI, we're all going to be enslaved and destroyed. And part of the reasoning, like there's some smart people saying this, and the reason that they're thinking along these lines is because they believe that the way that AI will come to be is we're going to define an objective function, we're going to write programs that are really good at optimizing objective functions, and we're going to get it just a little wrong. And so these machines are going to get really good at that objective function, so good that we're not going to realize what the implications of that are, and it's not going to align with what we really care about as human beings. And so that's caused a tremendous amount of concern. This sort of idea of, oh no, like how are we going to, what should we be what is ethics? Whose morality should we be getting the machines to optimize? So it brings up all sorts of really deep and hard questions.
And actually questions we need non-engineers to address too, to understand like what kind of world do we want to build?
That's right, but it is sort of predicated on this idea that it's going to be almost a one and done kind of thing. That we write down the objective function, we give it to the machine, and then it goes off and optimizes it really well. Because when the things that machines are good at, they often can crush us. So they'll get better at us at optimizing the thing that we tell it. I'm just not convinced that that really is going to be the path. So in terms of debunking, like one of the issues that I have is I don't think that's how humans work. I think that we get our objective function, we help construct our own objective function. We certainly get a lot from our peers and from our parents and from our, I don't know, our pastors or whatever. Like there's people who are actually trying to help shape what we take to be our goals. And I don't know how we're going to make robots not like that. I feel like we're going to have to all be partners in trying to get them to do the right thing. It's not going to be a one and done.
And we often get it wrong ourselves.
And we get it wrong, but we can adjust. There's a feedback loop.
We have feedback loops,
Yeah.
which usually involve emotions, actually. Yeah.
So, speaking about outraged things, another hot topic is the singularity. Is that at some point, robots or AI in general is going to reach the point that they achieve human intelligence, and using this, they can learn more and more about how things should be and just essentially take over. And that, at that point, is the singularity. So, Roz, is this something that
There's
you
a
believe
leap
in?
in there. I mean, everybody stop and think of the person you know who likes to learn more and more and knows the most. Are they taking over the world? Right? No, they'd rather be in the library learning more. We'll just give it the objective function that makes it not want to take over the world, but just keep learning, right? Yeah, I think I'm not one of those people who promotes that particular view, and I would use some caution around it. I mean, it's possible I'm wrong. Feel free to teach me if I should be more worried about that than I am. But I am concerned that we're building technology without thinking first about as many of the possible unintended consequences. One of the creators of iOS, the operating system that's on iPhones, was at one of these gatherings of leading computer science technology developer people, where they bring people together to interact and exchange ideas, and it's called Foo Camp. And during the break, when everybody should be like meeting all these super cool, amazing people, he looked around and he noticed that nobody was talking to anybody, that everybody was hunched over, breathing shallowly over their phone. And he said, as he looked around, I feel badly that I invented this. And only then, with these like post-reflections, are people starting to say, I never intended to make that. I intended to make something sticky that got eyeballs, but I didn't think about the whole social ecosystem. And as we see up there too, forgive me if you think it should be it, is introduced as a social robot, right? But, maybe one that would fit into some of my MIT more geeky circles, perhaps. But even there, we usually do better than that.
So could there be a I don't know, like a singularity-like thing where we get so sucked into the technology that I don't know what that would mean. Actually, never mind.
People who are hooked to WoW or League or whatever are like, so sucked in.
Oh, like World of Warcraft.
There's so many online things that already suck people in and away from their lives. And
stickiness.
We've optimized stickiness very well. We know how to do that to the point where it destroys lives, actually.
Oops.
But
oops, that's what developers say.
So this is more our own fault than robots taking over. We are yielding to technology in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe some of it is a symptom of people leaving too much to, to us engineers to just come up with what it is. I mean, the kind of future that it's going to be is going to be what the engineers right now are just cooking up, tonight, tomorrow night in the labs when their professors are off. When the cat's away, the mice will play. The robots will be built however the latest grad students think they can be built. And if we don't shape some better goals than the ones that are currently there, we'll reap what they create.
So I wonder what your reaction to this would be. So it strikes me that the negative things that we've brought up, one is the sort of the Facebook outrage thing, another is the stickiness of the iPhone thing, that in both cases, I think partly what's happened is we've gotten very smart engineers to figure out how to tap into our emotions and exploit that to get people to behave a certain way. So in what sense are emotions problematic as basically a loophole that technology can use, or that people can use through technology to undermine our better natures? Like, do you think about that in your emotions?
Yeah, we do. So our emotions drive a lot of, some say the most of our action, our attention, what we choose to do, whether you chose to come here or not, and whether you even get out of bed in the morning. And so people who understand emotion, like take salespeople study how to manipulate our emotions. Advertising people study how to manipulate our emotions. If you have a significant other in your life, it's very important that you study how to understand their emotions and how to show when you understand their emotions, whether they're pleased or displeased, interested or bored. Teachers, we need to know if people are confused, interested, bored. And we do our work more effectively if we read and respond to them. But also some people do their work most effectively and manipulatively when they exploit things about them that other people don't know. So we're very concerned that the technologies we build that help people understand emotions, first and foremost help the individual understand their own emotions and give them control over what they choose to share with others.
So do your tool, this is bad. Okay, I'm not here to ask questions, but I don't know. I got drawn in a little bit. I'm sorry. Stop me if you want to
okay.
stop me.
Tom can.
But I'll just one tiny follow-up question.
Sure.
Sorry. And that is, do you imagine that, maybe you were already hinting at this, but do you imagine that by giving people more feedback about their own emotions, that they have more awareness and they can reflect on them, and then maybe they're less likely to get sucked into some of this other stuff because they realize, wait a second, this isn't my outrage. This is outrage that has been foisted onto me, and I say no for now.
I was perfectly calm until I went on here and look at my everyday activity, and I'm perfectly calm, and then I do this Facebook thing, and I spike like that, and then I'm like this, and like, hey, I'm seeing a pattern here. I only get that way when I use that product. So maybe that product is doing something to me, and maybe it's manipulative.
Okay. On that topic, so if a product is doing something to you, and say perhaps a robot commits murder, who's responsible? So is there any?
Yeah.
Is
Ross. That would be terrible.
I think a lot, since I build wearables that are used as medical devices in Europe and applying for FDA now, we think a lot about responsibility, both in trying to build things to be the highest quality and avoid problems. But today, really the programmer, the owner of the business, the decision makers, that whole chain is responsible. But if Sophia were claiming, by the way, I heard she just got recognized citizen status or something, somebody here may know, in Saudi Arabia. So she's now got the rights of a citizen in Saudi Arabia. Now, those of you who recognize that she's made, it's made like a woman. And exempt from the gender rules there. So able to drive. And
so she might have more rights than some
She has
other
more
people.
rights than many women in Saudi Arabia right now.
That's absurd.
I think so too. And so if people are already treating it or her as having rights, and I guess she'll list which pronouns she wants us to use, and as having some responsibility, then do you also hold the robot responsible when, say, she's conducting a vehicle and something bad happens. We hear a lot about these conversations, not with robots today because they're not autonomous, but with cars as they're becoming autonomous. And I was just thinking of this horrible tragedy in New York yesterday, right, with a guy being called an act of terrorism, driving on the sidewalk. Would we program the autonomous car to not be allowed to drive on the sidewalk? I mean, my car already has software that if it senses a human being in the path, it supposedly hits the brakes. I haven't put any human beings in the path and tested it yet. I really don't want to. If you want to volunteer for that, you're braver than I am. But I think we would program it to try to do the right thing. Now, the problem is we can't foresee every possible thing. Like maybe to save a life, you have to swerve and go up on the sidewalk, right? And that, you have to try to think through all these things. And then who's liable today? It's going to be the people who made the software. But if it ever gets more than just these rights that make the news, but some real autonomy that people believe, then they're going to go after it, especially if it has a bank account.
So we endow our robots with bank accounts just for insurance purposes.
Then they have something to lose. That'll keep them in line.
If they have feelings that it's bad to lose it.
Fair enough.
Or some
The
loss.
objective function.
Right. And then we're back.
Okay, well, let's move on to a somewhat different topic. There was a rather weird article in Wired a month or so ago about Anthony Lewandowski, who's the rather notorious multimillionaire engineer who's at the heart of the trade secrets lawsuit between Uber and Waymo, which is about, essentially it's about theft of Google's self-driving car technology. And there was some discussion about that, but it turns out that Lewandowski has founded a religious organization called Way of the Future. And its purpose, according to previously unreported state filings as reported in Wired, is nothing less than to develop and promote the realization of a Godhead based on artificial intelligence. So he wants to create a Godbot. And I tried Googling this to find out, is there any more about this that we could, and Google knows nothing more about this.
Interesting.
But do either of you have any idea what he's up to here and what this might mean?
Godbot. No. I mean, I understand, I think, some of the impulses to I've heard people express this sort of idea that, if you can get a computer to be really good at, chess or Go or, I don't know, multiplying really big numbers, maybe we should entrust it with our other decisions that we have to make, other problems that we have to solve. And if we can do that and it does a good job, then maybe we should just let it be in control and take care of us. And so I have heard that argument for sort of, and they'll sometimes even use words like then we'll create our own God in exactly that setting. I don't know what that would mean. I don't know what a Godbot would be, and I don't know what it would mean to have it at this stage. They're just not that good at things. So if you've seen like AlphaGo playing Go, if you follow that sort of thing, Go is a board game, ancient board game, and people have been crushing computers at it for a very long time, and not anymore, but just really recently, like the last couple years. These systems are blowing people away, and so that's impressive and super cool. But there's nothing about being able to make decisions about the real world that are meaningful. You can try to extrapolate from, wow, it's really good at board games, therefore, it can handle, I don't know, the fire crisis, the wildfire crisis out west. Like, not the same thing.
There was one line in that article that caught my eye because it resonates with something I've seen too, and that is, I don't know how many of you have ever gotten information from a computer and maybe you believed it more than information some person gave you, right? There's something about when the computer or some big measurement system in the doctor's office gives you something. Doctors talk about this. Why does the patient believe what the little printout says and they don't believe me? That we seem to accord some more credibility sometimes to it, maybe because it's objective. But it can be objective and completely wrong. And yet people still believe it. I've even had people, when we've had early software trying to read people's affective state, their emotional state, and I know it's wrong, okay? But they believe what it's saying, and they're
About
like,
themselves.
oh, I guess I really feel that, huh? And I'm like, no, believe me, it doesn't know what you feel. It's reading the following outward signals, but they're like so willing to believe something because the computer is telling them, as if, you know, like maybe this is just people who believe, and this isn't just people who believe horoscopes and stuff like that, I know, because there are people, but they still like want to project this stuff on. So I think when he suggested that, there was a little bit of this, people will believe it more if it's coming from a bot. But a God bot, that's not a God that transcends space and time and the kind of God that, you know, I'm going to spend time talking about. A dog bot now. Now that might be fun. I think if you started something with a dog bot, a lot of people would go for that, people who like dogs.
Sony sort of did that.
Yeah, Sony iPod, they're bringing it back. Yeah, with a lot new capabilities.
Okay, so I'll ask the panelists one final question. After that, we're going to open it up to audience questions. But our final question is there any challenge that either of you would like to leave to the students here tonight on the subjects we've been talking about?
Sure. So, you know, don't be fooled if somebody's software tells you you're sad and you're not actually sad. Like, you know, believe yourself. Question the objectivity of software. Question the objectivity of, you know, websites and apps that you use, because they could be wrong. They could be trying to manipulate you. There's lots of things that you have to maintain a little bit of distance. So that's, I feel like a lot of the problems that we're worried about would be solved if everybody kind of just does a little sanity check a little bit more often. That would be my suggestion.
I think of, as I work on machines and also lately technology to try to understand people better, the more I learn, the more I'm amazed at how much I don't know, and how, like, the more we learn, the more we realize we're even more amazing in how we work. Like in the beginning, we thought we'd figure out how our brains worked and we'd build mathematical models of it and we'd be done by now. And the more we build and learn, the more complicated, the more interesting, the more infinite, in a sense, you know, not just infinitely large, but infinitely small and intricate and complex and beautiful, we find out that we are. And that just fills me with awe. So I think I would just leave people with that, to encourage you to keep looking for, don't just be happy with simple answers that you're given, but keep looking beyond everything and question a lot more.
And speaking of questions, does anybody like to come up to Mike and ask us anything?
There's a segue.
Well, thank you for having this. I think it's an extremely important discussion. I'm going to try and be as concise as possible, but I think my question might be a bit long. But basically, we've been talking, or you've been talking, and everyone's concerned about the ethical implications on the human side. But I'm wondering, an interesting discussion might be is the ethical implications on the robot side, right? And as we strive towards creating this intelligence which is similar to humans, and I think eventually we'll get there, the time frame is somewhat irrelevant. We're constructing something that we don't really understand ourselves that much, and primarily what I'm talking about is like consciousness, right? And we don't know how that arises. And so if we don't understand what consciousness is, what happens when we recreate human intelligence to a T and we consider them unconscious? And how do we know that consciousness joins the ride, and what implications might that bring of creating conscious beings, of fabricating and adjusting these conscious beings to the ends that we want? And if it comes to that point, what should we do? Should we abandon the project of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, fantastic. So I don't think we know, just to lead with that. But then to follow up, yeah, I think there's some legitimate concerns there. We don't really know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be that we look back at some point in the future, we've advanced in our ability to create this kind of technology, we look back and say, actually, the systems that we're building started to feel real pain 5 years ago, and we've been continuing to do experiments through all that time, causing tremendous suffering to these beings that we didn't know were beings yet. So that is a concern. It's hard to know that it's happening when it's happening. And I did have so I work in the area of reinforcement learning. We create systems that learn from a kind of reward and punishment. And recently I suggested to some students that we just do a bunch of sort of self-driving car experiments where at first it's going to run into the tree a whole lot of times. It's going to crash into the other cars. It's going to, but it's going to learn over time to do a better job. And one of the students specifically said, like, is it really worth doing that to the learning algorithm? The poor learning algorithm is going to have to crash into the other cars thousands, perhaps millions of times. And that could eventually be an issue. I don't think it's an issue now. These systems that we're looking at are so basic compared to the intricacies that Roz is describing in what we know to be conscious beings that we're just not there yet. We should keep our eyes open as we get closer to that point.
People already, like soldiers who saw the little six-legged robots picking up mines, and blowing up one, losing a leg, and then crawling on and blowing up another one and losing another leg. And after a while, when it's hopping around, they're horrified and they want you to stop because they're feeling like that it's in pain and that it looks like it's hurt, even though it has no affective, emotional ability, and certainly no consciousness, none of that stuff. But it pulls our heartstrings, right? We project onto it a lot of things that really aren't there. So we do have to think about our consciousness being projected on things. That said, when it comes to consciousness and machines, I don't know of any, despite that you'll see books with titles like Consciousness Explained, right? It's not, if you've read the book, sorry, I'll save you reading the book. It's not explained. We don't know how to build it. As far as I know, no computer scientists that respectable is saying they do know how to build it, nor can we foresee how to build it. Doesn't mean it can't ever be built, but we don't know how to do it. The only way I know today how to create something humanoid that is conscious is to create a human through procreation, which incidentally is a lot of fun. We have children, so like, why would you go try to do this other thing when you could build a human this old-fashioned way, right? So I think we have to keep in mind what our opportunity costs are as we work on some of these problems. Yeah.
I mean, so there's a sort of a follow-up. I know you specifically said, well, we're talking about human ethics and the impact on people. Let's switch over to the ethics of damaging the machine. But you can reflect it back one more time and say, actually, there's reason to believe that if people are mistreating machines, like the robots that are diffusing bombs and so forth, if people see the machines being mistreated, it does kind of erode their own humanity. It actually does have an ethical implication back to people, which I think is still relevant right now. Like, we don't want to be mistreating these systems because doing so will cause people to be less humane to each other.
Next question.
So if I recall correctly, the talk was titled, "Do Robots Have Souls?" And so I was wondering.
I think it said that will robots become human, but soul definitely came up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so I must have misheard that then. But I know neither of you are theologians, but if you have like a point of view on like whether in principle it would be, I think feasible to construct using silicon exact replicas of what happens now using biological matter, and so you have a kind of unpleasant horn of a dilemma, right? Do Christians want to think that those things made by man have souls, and women have souls, or would they prefer to deny that kind of status?
These are hard questions. We believe, and I'm curious in the Jewish tradition too, even though you're atheist now, but there's this notion that the soul, there's soul, there's spirit, there's life, right? There's some life-giving spirit. These words are not precisely defined scientifically from what I've seen. I've tried. If somebody has definitions you're really thrilled with, please give them to me. But I think we do think of life as still very mysterious, and the soul and the spirit as very mysterious. There's so many stories where people talk about you know, these like after-death experiences and so forth that are really compelling and amazing stories. And there's a lot of data on them, and it's, you know, it makes people think, most people think there's something there besides our material stuff. And we can't prove that there's nothing there besides our material stuff. And our Christian view is that God gives us this life, this spirit, that we are actually, our soul is loved and has an opportunity for eternal life as well, that it can persist, that we can be given new bodies. It's actually interesting. It's what a lot of my secular friends crave. They crave that their life goes on forever and they get a new body. And that's exactly what the Bible offers if we accept the free gift of that, that we will have eternal life and we will have a chance at a new body. And how that all works, we don't know how to build it. But it is an idea that is present in Christianity, and that soul is loved and given.
But going beyond that, so if we do have a machine that has some notion of human intelligence and perhaps a conscience, whatever that is, can we replicate this machine, replicate its entire history? So if the machine dies, the hardware just completely fails, well, we've got the software. Can we move the software someplace else? And so is the software the soul?
No software I've ever written is the soul. I can tell you that.
You just have to like define soul, left paren, right paren, colon,
Now,
and then
yeah.
you can make a soul.
Now, don't be fooled by somebody who just does, you know, print a hello world, yes, I have a soul, in the file, you know. Go back to.
I'm not a theologian, so I probably should just shut up. But like to me, this notion of a soul, I think our souls are a little bit more like mirrors and a little bit less like basins that something's been poured into. That we come to reflect, you know, the people that we've interacted with and the experiences that we've had. And I think from that perspective, a machine ultimately could have a kind of soul. But again, it's going to be a not so dissimilar kind of soul because it's going to be a product of its interactions with the rest of us. So it'll have some of the same opportunities that we have to learn to be, you know, who we are. But but no, I don't know.
By the way, if we start making it look like it has a soul and acting like it has a soul and telling everybody, I have a soul, if Sophia were to come out there saying, I have a soul, then it would probably instantly raise the rights activists people to try to do more to protect it and give it more rights.
Oh, maybe he was here first.
Hello. Professor Pickard, is that?
Picard.
Picard, like
Picard.
Captain
Picard.
Jean-Luc, yes.
My apologies. Professor Picard, what would you say to somebody who is in the same position that you were in before, who probably doesn't believe in God right now, but is thinking of all these things like immortality and you know, what happens after they die? What would your, I guess, just what would you say to them as far as the next step in their journey?
Great question. I'd want to get to know them a bit before I gave very specific advice. I guess what I would do is recommend that they don't just try to go it alone, but try to find some people that they can ask their questions of. I mean, certainly you can do a lot of reading and learning on your own. There's amazing resources. But I would also engage with other people. You know, it's like you say, the mirror, you know, being part of a community that is asking questions and pushing on you too, because sometimes we get the answer, but we don't like the answer, and we may need the support of others to help us grapple with what it means for us. And here, you know, let's say you're, you know, investigating Christianity. There's a lot of Christians who can share a huge diversity of experiences, right? This is a religion that's on every continent. It's not just a Western thing, right? It's dominant, fastest growing in places like Korea and China. So you you can find ways to understand it within each different cultural context, and each individual may need to do that within their own context.
Now, is there one or two points that just really resonate with you that you would share with somebody?
Well, I do highly recommend getting, getting educated by reading. Read the scriptures, and I was urged to read the Bible, which was great, and I keep reading it and rereading it regularly. I keep learning new things from it. I find it inspiring. But I think, if you were skeptical like I was, you don't just want to read one thing. You want to read a lot of things.
I wanted to ask a question with regards to, there's a point about how at this, currently when we create new technology, it's important for us to think about the implications on social dynamics and just ethically what these technologies will do to the society. We have to think a lot more about those things. And you brought up the sort of side example of everybody sort of being on their phones and looking down and not really interacting with each other in a physical space. And I wanted to know if you could go in deeper as to why you think that is an issue. I think it's really interesting, particularly because a lot of people that are our age or maybe undergraduate age right now grew up with these technologies, and technology, in a sense, looking into our phones is a very comfortable thing to us, because there's this quote that technology allows us to, at any point in time, to choose to do something else. If you're in a meeting, you can check your phone instead if you think that that's more important. But also if you're at home and you don't have friends or something like that, you can go onto Tumblr, or you can go onto the internet and find a community there. So I'm curious, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, my nose is often down. Mine too. I think I'm the only one who brought it. You guys, maybe it's in your pocket. I'm not saying it's wrong to look at your phone occasionally and have some balanced interaction. They're amazing devices. In fact, we're using the phones now. If it's on your lap, you can read your heart rate and respiration. I can show you how to do this with just some software, internet to try.globalvitals.com. I don't have stock. And then we're also learning how to, unfortunately, hopefully fortunately, to provide better health. But unfortunately, things like depression have been increasing significantly worldwide, so that it's on track to have a suicide every 20 seconds by the year 2020, and to be the #1 disease burden by the year 2030, more than taking more lives and years of disability from people than war, cancer, stroke. So #1 disease burden. And we're looking at what contributes to that, and it's complex. But if you aren't one of the most important things you can do, especially while y'all are in college, here comes my Southern Georgia Tech y'all, is reach out to each other and make new friends, and spend face-to-face time as well as time online with your friends, and develop some of the kind of friendships where you can be there for each other, whether it's challenging each other around topics like we're talking about here tonight, or just having somebody there when you're going through a crappy down time, which everybody does at some point in college, or at least everybody I've met does, but maybe you'll be the wonderful exception. So you need to not rely on this for all of your happiness. One real friend in real life is worth 1 million Facebook friends who aren't there when you need them.
So just to elaborate on that a little bit, I thought that was really well said. That to the extent that people are making clear, rational, well thought out decisions about when to be looking at the phone and when to be looking at somebody in the eyes, I think you're absolutely right. I think the problem is that the technology has become so compelling that it overrides our ability to make that decision in a clear and reasonable way. I have a thing that I call Facebook amnesia, where I go onto Facebook because I just want to. There's a thing I have to do. I have to post something. It's fine. And then 20 minutes later, I look up. I'm like, what just happened? Because I got there and I never did the thing that I set out to do. I did a whole bunch of other things that I shouldn't have been spending my time on. It wasn't how I was rationally trying to spend my time. And I think that's the concern that we're raising. Not that the technology is inherently evil or bad, but that it can subvert our ability to actually make good decisions.
Feel free to run your own experiments and just go off, like has been done in a number of psych studies, go off it for a week and see what happens to your mood. Most people, it goes way up.
We have time for 2 or 3 more questions.
What are your sources of morals for each of you? So we have a secularist and a Christian here. So for the Christian, where does she derive her morals from? Is it from the Bible or something outside the Bible? And if it is, what do you think are some of the limitations you have? And same question goes for you, Professor Litton.
Yeah, so that's good, I guess. I would say, there are principles that I try to follow. A lot of it has to do with, doing right by others. Part of that is I can see when I'm doing something that's hurting people. Sometimes it's less obvious, and lines become blurred and is a little bit more subtle. But I do try to touch base with, I don't know, I probably got them from my parents and stuff. I mean, if that's the real answer to your question. But where it turns out to be important to me, I reflect on the idea of what impact am I having on other people, and is that cool or not? What if I were in their shoes? How would I feel about it then? What's the principles that that if I stuck to and everybody stuck to, that would be, fair and just and reasonable and good for us? So where does that come from? I don't know. I learned part of it from my parents, part of it I've been constructing. Like I said, I got some of it, maybe not from you directly, but maybe from people that you talk to. I got it from all of us, just by interacting.
I think a lot of us, even if we don't practice a religion today, have gotten it from the Judeo-Christian traditional ethics and values and the 10 Commandments and so forth. I do routinely find wisdom that guides what I should do. I am not perfect, far from it, but I see guidance in the Bible that makes a huge difference in my life, beyond what's in the 10 Commandments, actually. And I also don't like to think of it as rules. I don't like those original set of rules. I don't know if people do this anymore. When I was 16, I bought my first car, and I'd saved up hard for it, and I was in pretty good shape, although it was a used car. And I also got this big fat manual that was called a shop manual that told me how everything in the car worked. My generation here knows what this is. It basically had all the parts of the car and how to keep it working well. And if you kind of operated for this RPM and when you're going this fast and so forth, and this gear, it was manual, then your car would last longer. It would work better. And indeed, as I tried to follow the shop manual, I found that my car performed awesome. Probably drove a lot faster than I should have on a number of occasions. But it really maximized the performance. And I find that when I kind of filled with faith, because sometimes I'm not so sure about it, but I go out trusting, try to follow the guidance, that it's like things perform better, not just me, but my social situation, and things just work out better. So I find it's a great source for guidance.
So my question concerns object agency and object subjectivity and sort of animism. And I was wondering what your opinions are on objects perhaps already being alive. And there's some theoretical discussions recently that are exploring the limits of human subjectivity, basically. I mean, how far can human subjectivity go, and perhaps can objects, I mean, in the history of humanity, objects have been considered sometimes alive, like in ancient Athens, like objects would go through a kind of trial if they were considered to be evil, or things like that. And I'm kind of interested sort of in this, in these ideas, and I was wondering what your opinions were. And also, when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking that perhaps if you are actually able to, if it's actually possible for a robot to have a life, perhaps it's not about giving it a life, but about bringing out the life in the object, perhaps the life that is already there in the matter itself?
Before we answer the question, that is the last question, unfortunately. So.
Animism, objects being alive. So it's a perspective. I don't know that it has much. I think it's saying more about how we're looking at the objects than it is saying about the objects themselves. Certainly, the programs, software that I've built, sure, if you want to think of it as alive and put it on trial, you can do that. I don't view them that way. You can. I have heard an argument that I resonate with that says that life isn't a 0-1 thing. There's sort of in between states of aliveness, and it's not unreasonable to think of a program that is actually reacting and interacting with the world as being, not completely not alive, somewhat alive. So I'm comfortable with that way of looking at it.
And it goes back to the spirit. I'm also thinking of the Disney animators book, The Illusion of Life, right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They can make a broom look like it's alive or a rug look like it's alive. And usually what they do is they make it responsive to things in the environment. They make it show emotion. And it tugs on our heartstrings. We feel sad when it looks sad, when the carpet droops in sadness or bounces up in joy. We feel the joy. So again, it's interesting. It's like it gets life when it has a relationship with an observer like us. And through that relationship, us perceiving it and watching it and it triggering our own feelings, then we project onto it this, it looks alive, it feels alive, it makes me feel a little more alive, I'm living with it. So it's interesting because it seems to come alive when it's in that relationship, not when it's just on its own.
All right, well, let's thank our presenters and moderator for an outstanding conversation.